Nathaniel Rateliff here at eTown, All or Nothing, one of the songs from your latest record, which is called And It's Still All Right. And it's cool to have a divorce record and to have a record that touches on love and loss and loneliness, and then have it be called And It's Still All Right.
Well, and like I said, as I started to put songs together, and the original idea of doing it with Richard, there was some songs like that dealt a lot with divorce, and then a lot of songs that really dealt with Richard's passing, and just the realization of trying to understand that we all have this sort of similar, I guess, undescribable brokenness, and that sometimes is a part of the human experience, and we're unable to share that with people around us, and sometimes that becomes a burden that is too much for people, and it causes us to slip, and so I wanted people to recognize that feeling, and to let people know that, like if Richard was still here, like we shared so much of these same feelings, and we were going through so much of the same things, and like I just wanted him to know that he wasn't alone, and that all of us, like, we're not alone. We all feel that way, and it's important to be vulnerable enough to tell people that we feel that way, so it does not become this burden that is, too much for us to carry.
Yeah, I think we all have found ourselves in the lyrics of songs that are about the kind of pain we're experiencing, and it's a great comfort because you recognize your own experience, and you recognize that you're not alone. You're not doing this by yourself. And this time is so weird that there's so many people who are feeling unsettled, and they've either lost friends or family, or they've lost their gig, or if they've lost, they're standing on shaky ground. And so there is something comforting about having that kind of vulnerability, that kind of sort of revelation of a shared experience of loss.
Right.
At this particular time, once again, kind of prescient. You made all this stuff up, and then now it sort of suits the times we're in. Yeah. I want to also mention that, you're a guy who recognizes that music can have an impact, and you have had success recently in the last few years. I know you know what it's like to be broke, and I know you now know what it's like to not be broke.
Right.
And it creates some empathy and ability to relate. You started the Marigold Foundation, and as I guess is just a way to give back. Why don't you tell us about how that started?
Yeah. So the Marigold Project, we started. We started doing a lot of work with Willie Nelson and Farm Aid, and met made friends with Carrie Knott, who was working there, who eventually came to work with us and run the foundation. At first, it was just like, as simple as like seeing things we wanted to change in our community, or even back home where we grew up in Missouri. You can see struggle in urban communities, and you can also see struggle in rural America with no opportunity or education, clean water, gun advocacy to try to create laws to protect people. And so we kind of try to cover all the bases.
Yeah. Those aren't all often in the same bucket, by the way.
No.
A lot of times people will focus on urban issues or rural issues or clean water or education. Guns are sort of like a trickier one when you're talking about advocating for gun legislation.
Right, and that was scary.
In farm country, too.
Yeah. I try to approach it, with advocating for change in gun regulation, that I grew up hunting and I'm a gun owner. And so try to approach it from that aspect, from the idea of being a person from rural parts of the country where we wouldn't have eaten if we didn't have guns when I was a kid, Right. So it is still very real and very important. I think I question the need for civilians to have, fully automatic weapons. I don't think that's necessary. but it's also it's a conversation, and I think that's our main goal as Marigold Project is we see a problem, and instead of coming in with a solution, it's like, how do we talk about this to create change? How do we talk about the people this is actually affecting? Let's get kids together from all these shootings, and students and parents that have lived through these shootings, and let's see what they have to say, and what do they want to see change? How can we make sure that schools are safe so that there's not these active shooter drills and kids can actually just focus on learning, and they're already burdened with this sort of these social things that they shouldn't have to worry about that as children,
Yeah, it's not easy to be a young person in school these days for lots of reasons, but
Right.
worrying about whether there's going to be an active shooter in your school is something they shouldn't have to add to their list.
And it just continues to grow with the things that need to be done.
Yeah.
Like Western water conservation is a big deal. We've worked with Denver Black Lives Matter to try to change some legislation in Greenwood Village, and that has been so far successful.
Yeah, good for you. I heard about that. And I know you supported an organization that we featured on eTown too called Project Worth More.
Yeah.
Which is an awesome organization.
Yeah, of
really
course.
helping with immigrants and finding their solid ground as they come over. And
Yeah, it's a scary time. There's a lot of unhoused people, and so it's and you see that in our communities, and how do we continue to change that,
well, again, I think what's so interesting is your background, whether it's just growing up in a rural part of the country, or as a gun owner, or in a religious family, or being poor, or being a truck driver, or being all the various labor gigs you've had, understanding how to drive heavy equipment, and then also being able to get on stage and entertain a crowd of thousands. It gives you credibility across all these fronts, and in some ways, we're in this funny era where musicians have as much credibility and in some cases as much influence as our elected officials.
Right.
And so there is that sense that you can really change things.
And I feel like not just the sense of it, but I feel like we've done some good, and it's, it's one of those things that's hard because sometimes I want to pat myself on the back, but I was like, I'm not doing it to make myself feel better. I'm doing it because change is something that needs to happen,
Now, that's what we've been up to here at eTown for a long, long time, too, just highlighting stories of people trying to make things better all over the place. So,
And it's that sense of building community, which is what you guys do here, that brings people together and brings more understanding. And the more we understand each other, the less fear and hatred we have towards each other. And I think with the divide that we have in the country, it's imperative that we start to understand each other better, even and just be able to accept different opinions. But, yeah.